There were some days in our lives that I thought were beautiful, and I think it's very important to make sure I always, we had good times. We loved to dance with each other.
The courtroom felt less like a hall of justice and more like an arena where reputations, dreams, and decades of carefully guarded secrets were about to be torn apart. The air vibrated with tension so sharp it could cut. Every bench was filled with reporters balancing notebooks on their knees. Fans of Sister Wives clutching programs and old magazines. Former acquaintances of the Browns sitting stiffly, hoping to see vindication or downfall. The eyes of the nation, through the glow of countless live streams and cameras outside, were fixed on this single room. At the defense table, Kody Brown sat like a shadow of his former self. The charismatic man who once spoke of faith, family, and unity was gone. In his place hunched a restless figure, pale and cornered, his fingers drumming nervously against polished oak. His tie was too tight, his suit too stiff, his posture a constant betrayal of the panic simmering beneath his skin. Every twitch, every swallow, every glance toward the judge seemed to scream that he knew the walls were closing in. Across from him sat the women who had once believed in him. Christine, Janelle, and Meri, 3 ex-wives, bound together not by affection, but by scars. They had been rivals in the past, fractured and divided by the very man now on trial. But today, they were united in purpose, their differences buried beneath the gravity of this fight. Christine leaned forward, her hands clasped tightly, her jaw set. Janelle's notebook lay open before her, her pen already poised like a sword. Meri, quieter, her pain worn deep into her expression, sat slightly apart yet radiated this same resolve. Together, they formed a wall unyielding, immovable. The gavel fell. Court is now in session. A ripple of silence swallowed the room. The judge, renowned for her sharp impartiality, wasted no words. This case concerns allegations of financial misconduct, hidden assets, and misappropriation of funds. The accusations, already known to many, struck harder when spoken aloud in the authority of a court. Heads turned. Murmurs stirred. Kody's face burned crimson, but he forced his lips into a flat line, as though daring the world to believe otherwise. His lawyer rose, his tone smooth and practiced, weaving a narrative of devotion, sacrifice, and loyalty. "My client gave his life to this family," he insisted. "These accusations are bitter inventions of resentment." But even as the lawyer spoke, the jury's eyes wandered to Kody's bouncing leg, to his clenched fists, to the sweat gleaming at his temple. Across the aisle, Christine's stillness carried more weight than any rebuttal. She leaned back slightly, watching, waiting, the storm of truth resting on her shoulders. And then it came. "Christine Brown, please take the stand." The hush was instant. Reporters froze, pens suspended midair. Even the whir of the ceiling fan seemed too quiet. Christine stood slowly, each movement deliberate. The soft click of her heels echoed like gunfire in the silence. When she placed her hand on the Bible, the moment felt sacred an oath not only to the court, but to the millions who had watched her life unfold behind television screens. Her voice, when it came, was calm but carried a quiet fury. "For over 20 years, I believed in a vision. A family built on faith, sacrifice, and unity. I trusted Kody. I trusted him with everything. While I cared for our children, while I gave everything to our home, he was taking from us behind our backs." A gasp ran through the gallery. Some leaned closer, others scribbled wildly. It wasn't just money. Christine pressed on, her eyes locked on the jury. It was trust. "He said we were in this together." But what I discovered shattered that lie. She told them of the sleepless night. She checked the accounts, the unexplained withdrawals, the transfers to names and places she had never heard of. She described the crushing realization that money meant for her children's education. Their future had vanished into shadows. From the defense table, Kody bristled, shifting violently. His lawyer gripped his arm like a leash, whispering urgently. But Kody's glare burned across the room, aimed squarely at the woman who had once been his most devoted wife. "When I confronted him," Christine continued, her voice trembling just slightly, "he dismissed me, said I didn't understand finances, said I was imagining things. But I wasn't. I saw the proof. I lived it. And it broke me. Several jurors shifted uncomfortably. One woman in the gallery wiped her eyes. Another whispered finally. Christine's voice softened, but the truth within it struck harder than any accusation. My children asked why we struggled while their father bought new trucks while gifts poured into Robin's house. How do you explain to a child that their father had the means to ease their pain, but chose not to? How do you explain betrayal from the man who promised us everything? Her words hung in the air, heavy as stone. The judge herself leaned forward, listening intently. And then came her final blow. Christine straightened, her tone steeled with defiance. I am not here for revenge. I am not here for bitterness. I am here because silence protects the guilty. For years, I lived in fear of breaking the image, of betraying the story the world thought we lived. But behind the smiles were lies. I refuse to be silent any longer. This is about accountability. For me, for Janelle, for Meri, and most of all for our children. The words thundered through the courtroom. Kody snapped. He lurched to his feet, his voice booming, veins rising in his neck. That is a lie. She's twisting everything. I gave you everything, Christine. You left me, and now you want to destroy me because you couldn't handle the gavel cracked down like lightning? Sit down, Mr. Brown. The judge roared. One more outburst and you will be held in contempt. The gallery erupted murmurs, gasps, reporters scribbling madly. The clicking of cameras outside bleeding through the walls. Kody's lawyer yanked him down hard into his seat, whispering furiously. But the damage was done. He had shown his rage, his desperation. Christine hadn't even flinched. She only turned back to the jury, her expression calm, almost pitying, as if to say, see him for who he really is. Her testimony closed, but its echo remained, carved into the silence that followed. She had drawn the first blood. The plaintiff's attorney rose again, his voice calm but deliberate. Your Honor, the plaintiffs now call Janelle Brown to the stand. A fresh ripple surged through the gallery. Reporters straightened pens at the ready. The jury leaned forward again, caught in the unfolding saga. Janelle rose, her steps firm, her composure unshaken. Where Christine had been fire and heartbreak, Janelle carried an energy colder, steadier like steel sharpened for battle. She adjusted her glasses, gathered her notes, and walked toward the witness stand as though she had been preparing for this moment her entire life. The silence was so thick, it felt as though the walls themselves were bracing for what she was about to reveal.
It was hard, and now I don't have to do that anymore. It's very liberating. It's so strange because I see this life I had and I see it over here, like kind of over.
Christine had spoken from the heart, but everyone knew Janelle was different. Where Christine carried fire and fury, Janelle carried precision, a surgeon's hand instead of a warrior's blade. She had always been the calm in chaos, the one who balanced budgets, held schedules together, and steadied the family when others unraveled. But today she carried something far more dangerous than composure. She carried evidence. Janelle rose slowly, a thick folder pressed against her chest like a shield. Her movements were unhurried, deliberate, but each step radiated certainty. The kind that made jurors lean forward without realizing it. As she approached the witness stand, Kody shifted in his chair. His jaw tightened, his fingers tapping in frantic rhythm against the polished wood of the defense table. He already knew what she held. He already knew what was about to come crashing down on him, and he hated it. After swearing her oath, Janelle sat, placing the folder neatly in her lap. She didn't look at Kody, not once. Her eyes stayed fixed on the attorney, her expression sharp, almost cutting in its resolve. Mrs. Brown, the attorney began, his voice respectful, measured. You've heard Christine's testimony. Now, we understand you have documents you wish to present to the court. Can you explain what these are? Janelle nodded, her voice calm but resonant as she opened the folder. These are bank statements, property deeds, and financial records I obtained personally over the past 3 years. They show hidden accounts, unexplained withdrawals, and properties signed solely under Kody Brown's name without disclosure to the rest of the family. She held up the first page. Bold red circles marked numbers that screamed across the paper. The attorney took it gently, handing it to the bailiff, who carried it to the judge and jury. As the paper made its journey across the room, Janelle continued, her voice steady and sharp. This single statement shows a transfer of $50,000 from our joint family account into an account I had never seen before. When I asked Kody about it, he told me it was for taxes. But when I investigated further, I discovered the account was used for personal expenses, luxury items none of us knew about. The jury leaned forward. A murmur rippled through the benches. Reporters scribbled furiously, pens racing to capture every damning detail. Kody's composure cracked. His palm slammed against the table with a thunderclap. That's a lie, he bellowed. That was my money I earned. Mr. Brown, the judge's voice cut like steel, her gavel cracking once against wood. You will remain silent unless spoken to. One more outburst and you will be removed from this courtroom. The silence that followed was suffocating. Kody's face burned scarlet, his chest heaving, but he sank into his chair. Muttering under his breath like a cornered animal, his lawyer leaned in, whispering furiously, but the damage was already done. Janelle didn't flinch. She turned a page, holding up another document. This, she said firmly, is the deed to a property purchased in Arizona. The funds came directly from accounts meant to cover our household needs. Yet the property was signed solely under Kody's name. None of us, Christine, Meri, or myself, were listed. I only discovered it through a record search. The bailiff handed the deed to the jury. Eyebrows rose, whispers passed between them. Their faces betrayed their shock. The attorney leaned closer. Mrs. Brown, how did you feel when you uncovered this? Janelle's eyes flickered, half anger, half sorrow. Betrayed. For years, I trusted him. I worked. I contributed. I built a life around his promise that we were equal, that our sacrifices mattered. To learn he was building something behind our backs, something meant only for himself and Robin. It was devastating. It wasn't just money he stole, it was trust. It was partnership. It was the very foundation of our family. The words struck the room like a hammer. The gallery shifted, some nodding grimly, others shaking their heads in disbelief. Christine sat straighter, lips pressed in grim acknowledgement. Meri's eyes glistened, tears hovering but refusing to fall. Kody's lawyer shot to his feet, his voice sharp. Your Honor, this evidence is circumstantial. My client had every right to manage finances as he saw fit. These women are not legal spouses. Their claims hold no basis in law. The judge narrowed her eyes, unimpressed. That is for the jury to decide. Sit down, counsel. The defense lawyer obeyed, his face pale. Janelle's voice cut through the charged air again. This next document shows a series of withdrawals totaling $30,000 over 6 months. The timing coincides with expensive trips Kody took with Robin, trips none of us were told about. Gifts purchased for her children while ours went without. Gasps rose from the benches. This time the gallery could not contain its outrage. Voices erupted, angry and credulous. The bailiff barked for order, his hand brushing the holster at his side. The judge slammed her gavel twice. This is your final warning, she thundered. The next interruption will result in removals. The room fell silent again, but the tension buzzed like a live wire. Janelle leaned forward, her tone hardening. At first, I didn't want to believe it. I wanted to think it was a mistake. But the more I dug, the clearer it became. Kody wasn't protecting us. He wasn't planning for our future. He was protecting himself. He was building a life that excluded us. Her voice cracked just slightly, but she pressed on. For years, I defended him. I told myself he was overwhelmed, just juggling too much. But no, these were deliberate choices. Choices that left us and our children struggling while he lived in comfort. That's why I'm here to show you the truth, written in these pages. She laid the folder, thick with paper, on the desk before her, the sound loud in the still courtroom. Every number, every signature, every deed tells the same story, a story of betrayal. The attorney straightened. Your Honor, we submit these as exhibits, S through F. The judge nodded, noting the entry. Jurors flipped through copies, their faces tightening with every page. And Kody. Kody sat rigid, his hands gripping the table so tightly his knuckles blanched. His lips moved in silent fury, eyes darting between the jury and Janelle. For once, the man who always dominated the room was powerless, drowned beneath a mountain of undeniable proof. When Janelle's testimony ended, the silence that followed was absolute. No one shifted. No one breathed too loudly. The weight of her words lingered like smoke after a fire. Finally, the judge's voice broke through. The evidence will be entered into record. The jury will consider it in full. She turned to the defense. Cross-examination. Kody's lawyer rose reluctantly, but it was clear the damage had already been done. And then, just when the tension felt unbearable, the plaintiff's attorney spoke again, his voice softer, almost mournful. "Your Honor, the plaintiffs call Meri Brown to the stand." For a long moment, Meri didn't move. She sat frozen, her hands clasped in her lap. Her eyes stared downward, unfocused. Christine leaned over, squeezing her arm. Janelle gave a small nod, wordless encouragement. Finally, Meri rose. Her steps were slow, hesitant, as though each one carried the weight of years she had tried to bury. The sound of her shoes against the polished floor echoed too loudly, too hauntingly, until she reached the witness stand. After swearing her oath, she lowered herself into the chair, her shoulders trembling, her hands twisting together. She didn't look at Kody. She couldn't. The attorney approached, his tone gentle. "Meri, you were Kody's first wife. You've known him longer than anyone else. Can you tell the court in your own words what your experience was like in this marriage?" Meri's lips parted, but at first, no words came. She swallowed, blinking rapidly, fighting tears. Silence stretched, heavy and raw, until she finally whispered, "It was lonely." The gallery gasped. That single word, so simple, so devastating, hung in the air like a ghost. She drew a shaky breath, trying again. "When I married Kody, I believed in us. I believed in the family we dreamed of building. I was proud to be his first wife, proud to stand beside him. But as the years went on, I stopped being a wife. I stopped being a partner. I became invisible." Her voice cracked. She raised a trembling hand to her mouth. The jury leaned in, riveted, as though they were witnessing her soul being laid bare. "I watched him build bonds with the others." Being laid bare. "I watched him build bonds with the others."
Final showdown.
There's been more effort put into.
Christine's laughter filled the house. Janelle's practicality held everything together. And then Robin, her voice faltered, barely a whisper. Robin became everything. She became the wife he wanted, the family he chose. She stopped, closing her eyes against the tears. The attorney gave her a moment before asking softly, "Meri, can you explain how Kody treated you during those years?" Her hands clenched tightly in her lap. "He dismissed me. He shut me out. When I reached for him, he pulled away. When I tried to talk, he ignored me. At family gatherings, I was the shadow in the corner. But when appearances mattered, when the cameras rolled, when money mattered, suddenly I was his wife again. Suddenly, I had value." Gasps rippled through the benches. Christine covered her mouth with her hand. Janelle's jaw tightened. Even the judge's eyes softened, though her face stayed composed. Then Meri reached into her bag. Slowly, carefully, she pulled out a small, worn notebook. She held it as though it were something fragile, something sacred. "I started writing things down," she whispered. "Things I couldn't say out loud. Conversations or the lack of them. Nights I spent crying. Days I felt erased. It was the only way I could make sense of the silence." The attorney stepped closer, his tone even gentler. "Would you be willing to share an entry with the court?" Her hands trembled as she flipped to a ribbon-marked page. She cleared her throat, her voice quivering but strong enough to carry. "Entry, April 16th. She paused, swallowing hard. "Today I tried to talk to Kody about us. He looked at me like I was a stranger. He said he didn't have time for this conversation. Then he walked away." Her voice broke. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. The silence that followed, Meri's trembling confession wasn't an ordinary silence. It was heavy, suffocating. A silence that pressed on every chest in the room until breaths came shallow and eyes watered. Even the reporters so trained to capture every flicker of drama had stopped mid-sentence. Their pens frozen above their notepads as if words were useless in the face of such raw honesty. Meri clutched her worn notebook against her chest, her fingers trembling. That notebook had been her secret vault, her only confidant during years of invisible suffering. Every page was a record of a woman's soul unraveled in the shadows. She whispered, her voice low but cutting like broken glass. That wasn't just one day. That was years. Years of being shut out. Years of trying to hold on when he had already let go. The words cracked through the air, louder than any scream. Kody shifted violently in his chair, the mask of control slipping further. His lawyer's hand clamped down on his arm, forcing him to stay seated. His face burned crimson, jaw tight. Eyes darting across the courtroom, searching desperately for anyone, anything to defend him. But no one did. The gallery stared back, cold and unmoved. Meri finally lifted her eyes and, for the first time in the entire trial, looked directly at him. Her gaze wasn't laced with rage. It wasn't fire. It was deeper, more shattering. A gaze of aching sadness, of love betrayed beyond repair. "You didn't just betray us with money, Kody," she said, her voice breaking and strengthening all at once. "You betrayed us with love. You took vows, promises, and you broke them. You broke me. And I need this court to hear that because for years, you refused to hear me." A ripple surged across the courtroom. One juror discreetly wiped at a tear. Another leaned forward, chin resting on her hand, eyes glistening. The plaintiff's attorney stepped back, his voice steady. "No further questions, Your Honor." The judge nodded. Cross-examination. Kody's lawyer stood, his movements stiff, as though already defeated by the tidal wave of Meri's honesty. He paced deliberately before stopping. "Mrs. Brown, isn't it true that, despite all of this, you stayed? That you remained in this marriage willingly for years?" Meri's lips quivered, but her voice cut with quiet thunder. "Yes, because I believed in my family. Because I believed he would change. Because I believed love was worth fighting for. I stayed. Until there was nothing left of me to stay for." Her words landed like hammer blows. The lawyer faltered, shoulders sagging. He sat down quickly, defeated. The jury leaned closer, sympathy etched into their faces. The judge scribbled a note, then lifted her head. "Mrs. Brown, you may step down." Meri rose slowly, still clutching her notebook as though it were both armor and burden. She walked back to her seat, every step echoing in the hushed courtroom. Christine reached out, tears streaming down her cheeks, and squeezed her hand. Janelle leaned closer, whispering something supportive, firm. Together, they held her up. Kody, meanwhile, sat frozen. Fury rippled through his jaw, his fists clenched so tightly his knuckles whitened. But beneath the rage was something worse. The dawning realization that the image he had built for decades, patriarch, leader, provider, was unraveling in real time. For the first time, the courtroom no longer saw Kody Brown as the confident head of the Brown family. They saw him as he was. A man exposed, undone not by documents, not by accountants, but by the quiet, devastating truth of the woman who once loved him most. The air itself seemed brittle, like glass ready to shatter. Christine's fire had shaken the walls. Janelle's evidence had built an iron case. And Meri's confession had pierced the human heart. All eyes turned now to the man at the center of it all. "Your Honor," Kody's lawyer said, his voice thin. "The defense would like to call Mr. Kody Brown to the stand." A collective murmur rippled through the gallery. Reporters shifted forward, pens ready. This was the moment the patriarch would finally speak for himself. Would he summon the charisma that once captivated millions? Or would the cracks widen until only ruins remained? Kody rose stiffly, jaw locked, his steps quick and uneven, as if he was racing an invisible clock. He swore the oath carelessly, his voice flat, and slumped into the witness chair with a glare at the jury. His lawyer cleared his throat. Mr. Brown, you've heard the accusations. You've listened to your former wives testify. Can you tell us, in your own words, your side of the story? Kody leaned forward, gripping the edges of the witness stand like a man clinging to a cliff. His voice rang out, forceful at first, a desperate attempt to regain control. My side is simple. I gave my life to this family. Every day, every hour, I work to provide, to keep a roof over their heads, to give my children opportunities. And what do I get in return? And what do I get in return?
I'm gonna come over for dinner. All my kids are coming over. Some of my kids are great with David. Some of my kids are like, on the fence a bit.
Betrayal, twisting my sacrifices into weapons against me. A few jurors tilted their heads, curious. But as he pressed on, his words curdled. They want to paint me as greedy, as selfish. These women, he jabbed a shaking finger. Toward Christine, Janelle, and Meri knew what they signed up for. They smiled on camera, they took the money, they lived in the homes I built, and now suddenly they're victims. No, they're bitter exes, jealous and angry, and this, he gestured to the courtroom. This is their revenge. Christine's jaw tightened, her eyes flashing like steel. Janelle leaned back slowly, lips pressed thin, head shaking. Meri clutched her notebook tighter, but her expression was calm, unflinching. The courtroom shifted. Whatever sympathy Kody might have sparked began to crumble under the weight of his bitterness. His lawyer tried to redirect him. Mr. Brown, can you explain the financial documents Janelle presented? The transfers, the deeds. Yes, I can explain. Kody snapped, slamming his palm on the stand. The sound cracked through the silence. Do you know how hard it is to manage a family this size? 18 kids. 4 wives. Multiple households. Money had to move constantly. Properties had to be in my name was simpler. That doesn't mean I was stealing. That means I was leading. He was shouting now, sweat glistening on his forehead. His lawyer tugged at his sleeve, whispering desperately, but Kody yanked his arm free. And Robin and I were the only ones truly committed to building a future. Gasps erupted. Christine's lips curled into a bitter smile. Janelle's eyes closed briefly, as if in painful confirmation. Meri's tears finally spilled down her cheeks, but her posture remained strong. The plaintiff's attorney rose smoothly. Objection, Your Honor. That is not testimony. That is an attack. Sustained, the judge snapped. Mr. Brown, you will restrict yourself to answering questions. But the damage was done. The jury had seen his anger. They had seen the favoritism slip from his own lips. The plaintiff's attorney approached for cross-examination.com. Controlled, deadly, Mr. Brown. You say you did all this for the family, and yet the deeds were only in your name. The bank transfers went only to accounts you controlled. The gifts and trips went only to Robin's household. How is that leadership, Mr. Brown? Isn't that favoritism? Isn't that betrayal? Kody's mouth opened, but no words came. His jaw moved, his breath caught, but his voice faltered. The attorney pressed closer. Or perhaps this was never about leadership. Perhaps it was about control. Control of money. Control of property. Control of people. Isn't that the truth? The jury stared at him, eyes unblinking. The gallery leaned forward. The judge herself watched without mercy. Kody's voice cracked. No, I did everything for them. But the power was gone. The booming patriarchal voice was hollow now, trembling. And then the final strike. Mr. Brown, the attorney said, his voice echoing through the hushed room. If you truly did everything for them, why are you the only one left sitting alone? The words detonated like thunder. Christine's chin lifted in defiance. Janelle's gaze hardened, unyielding. Meri closed her eyes, tears streaming, but her shoulders straightened. The gallery erupted into whispers. The judge's gavel thundered, calling for order, but even silence could not erase what had been spoken. Kody Brown sat slumped, broken. The man who once ruled with arrogance, now exposed before the world. The patriarch had fallen, and everyone in that courtroom knew the sister wives had finally risen.